request that we'd like to get started. Good morning to everyone. We are continuing the conversation for the forum topics today. We're talking here about building a pipeline of entrepreneurial talent. And so to get started, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this session, Selena Higgins, who's the Executive Director for Knox Street Studios. She's doing tremendous work in the community around the STEM plus the arts programs for for the new majority communities that we're serving. And so at this time, I'd like to go ahead and turn the floor over to Selena, and she'll introduce our panelists, or the panelists will introduce themselves. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, welcome everyone. My name is Selena Higgins, and I am excited to be here with each of you today. A little about myself. I serve as the Executive Director of Knox Street Studios. We are an entrepreneurial support organization based in Durham, North Carolina, as well as a STEM education provider working with individuals ages 11 through 24. I have the pleasure of personally working with Tom Rue and NC Idea, and I applaud their work. And recently, I met Mr. Thomas Stiff and becoming a quick fan of his work as well. So I'm going to pass it off to you all to introduce yourselves. Thomas, if you would go first with the introduction and tell us a little bit about yourself, your ties to North Carolina, and a little bit about your organization.
Thank you, Selena, and it's good to be with you this morning, and just appreciate the opportunity to discuss what we need to do moving forward from a small, underserved, and underestimated business perspective. Glad to hear you're out of Durham, and I'll start there first. I'm a Durham native and obviously a North Carolina native, so very strong commitment not only to Durham, but to the state. I currently serve as the president of the North Carolina Community College System. North Carolina's community college system is the third largest in the country. I submit to you, we're the best community college in the country. Our 58 community colleges span the state of North Carolina. We have offerings from nursing programs to biotechnology to truck driver training and numerous other programs. Part of my vision for the North Carolina Community College System is for us to be the first choice for higher education in North Carolina for an accessible and affordable education. We're a pathway to certification, 2-year associates, or on to a 4-year college or university. So it is just an honor and a blessing for me to serve as the 10th president of the community college system, in particular in this point in history, because of the vast opportunities within the state's community college system. As we recover and grow our economy, the community college system will be on the front lines providing that education and training for the workforce that is needed moving forward. So, and as I know from my own personal and professional background, small business, underserved businesses, minority-owned businesses are going to play a key role in our state's recovery. So glad to join today's conversation, and glad to know, I guess it's a trifecta. I know Tom is in Durham as well. So it's, once again, Durham will help lead the state in policy and thought as we move forward.
So I'm Tom Rue. I have the good fortune to work with an incredible team at NC Idea. NC Idea is an independent private foundation. So we're 501c3, specifically structured as a private foundation, or PF as it's referred to. I use the modifier independent because many private foundations are usually created from a funding event from a founder. So you think of, most famously, Ford Foundation or the Gates Foundation, right? There was a Mr. or Mrs. or a family that bequests money to create the foundation. We do not have, a founding family member. Our money that created the initial endowment that funds our activities came from actually an equity investment that the state of North Carolina had done back in the 90s. And in the early 2000s, there was a liquidity event. The company was sold, created a windfall. And the folks, my predecessor specifically, who was the founder of the organization, there was a group, an effort to basically sequester some amount of that money and protect it, put it in the form of a foundation so that it could serve a longer term purpose, specifically focused on economic development through entrepreneurship, because that's where the original money came from. So we manage and operate a strategic combination of grants and programs. That also makes us a little unique because most foundations will typically do one or the other. They'll either run programs that they self-fund, or they'll just write checks based upon whatever criteria that they have. We do both things. We feel we're better at both based upon what we learn on the other side of the house. So the challenges we learn in operating programs, I think, helps us be a smarter grant maker. And what we learn in the grant making is we really see where the gaps are in the marketplace. And where there's a gap, then and only then do we consider filling the gap with a potential program. If we see something happening in the marketplace that's doing it just fine, we don't feel compelled to create yet another program. Instead, we would seek to support that existing program and increase its capacity to do more. I joined the foundation as the second CEO March 1st of 2016. So I've been here a little over 5 years now. And during the last 5 years, we really embarked on broadening our focus and our mission and our intentionality. So prior to 90% of the activity was really to the benefit of the triangle. When I came on board and, based upon the direction of the board that hired me, there was a shared commitment to say, we really need to get more statewide, genuinely and authentically, which has just been a big commitment of being there, right? And going to the places that can benefit from working with us. And then we had to, really focus on helping underserved populations, which we classify as our rural communities, our minority founders, and our female founders. So collectively, we call that, or we reference that internally as the underserved. And we made a commitment 5 years ago to say that no less than 50% of all of our money and time and resources and programming have to be in service of the underserved community. Fast forward 5 years later, I'm happy to say that we're hitting that number by well over in order of magnitude around 80% of all our programs do so, yet with still a focus on high growth potential, entrepreneurship. What we're really trying to do is help people, empower people to realize, economic independence and wealth creation and job creation through entrepreneurship.
Thank you both for making those introductions. And that, Tom, flows perfectly into our first question. What are the programs, resources that you have in place to assist underestimated businesses?
So we have several, actually. So, in our just run-of-the-mill programs, and our flagship program being the Seed and Micro Grant Program, which are $50,000 and $10,000 grants. We already, as I mentioned earlier, we already have a goal in our, like I said, our flagship programs to fund more of the underestimated potential of entrepreneurs that are out there. But in addition to having that 50% or better goal across the board, we have recently, through our ecosystem partner program, expanded our focus for working with organizations that are doing likewise to help underestimated entrepreneurs throughout the state. As a matter of fact, our last big cohort, which was another over $2 million we put into that part of the ecosystem, that was a primary driver for that. And then in particular, we took it up a notch last year, like many other people that were reacting to things that were happening nationally. And we said, we really want to place an emphasis, frankly, to make North Carolina the best state in the country for Black people to start and grow companies, full stop. So that manifested in the creation of the Black Entrepreneurship Council, which we founded in August of last year. We did a call for applications. we had to learn that if we wanted to have this impact and serve this community, we had to figure out a way to do this work, our great intentions notwithstanding. So what we concluded on was that we needed to put together a council of the people we seek to serve, and then learn to trust, to say, we know what our role here is, and that is to find the money that people can use, and to make sure the water pitchers are full and everybody's got, a pad of paper and a sharp pencil, and let the council decide what the funding priorities and the programmatic priorities should be. We have also, beyond the ambition to do that, as I know, and Selena, as your colleague Talib always reminds me about the capital stack, ambition without funding is, I don't know what, hallucination maybe. So we have now, since August, committed $1 million to the BEC effort. We also were fortunate enough to receive a very generous $100,000 grant from the Wege Foundation of Southwest Michigan, of all places. And then most recently, we received a very significant commitment from the Research Triangle Foundation. Some of you may have seen that news. We just released that 48 hours ago, where they made a $1.25 million commitment to both our ecosystem efforts and our Black Entrepreneurship Council efforts.
Sure, and my points really align well with Tom, because one of the best things about being in North Carolina, and that's why I say as a proud North Carolina native, when it comes to serving our small business community, and particularly our underestimated businesses, is the vast landscape of resources that we have in North Carolina, both public and private. As the president of the North Carolina Community College System, I'm proud to say that we have a long history with our open door policy with the community college system. Our state small business owners can find help they need at a community college small business center located conveniently across the state. We have a small business centers in each of our 58 community colleges across the state of North Carolina. So businesses can access free confidential business counseling, free seminars, webinars, research and referral information to help them start and grow their businesses and receive that type of support to provide the framework for success. So just the very ecosystem in North Carolina provides a good foundation for our small business community in particular. And we are just, in particular, as we come out of this pandemic and as North Carolina recovers, to encourage the utilization of these resources as businesses work through this economic impact to our system.
Selena, before you jump to the next question, if I may, I'd like to amplify what Thomas is saying. I've had in prior lives, professional lives, I've had the great opportunity to work not only on a national but a global scale around entrepreneurial ecosystems. 7 years at the Kauffman Foundation as the vice president of entrepreneurship there really showed me a lot. And one of the things I can say with that experience is that North Carolina has exceptional good fortune of a great community college system. I cannot be a bigger fan of it. And I think it is, frankly, I think it's underappreciated for what it does for the state and for what the potential it has to help individuals build and grow businesses. The SBC, the small business centers, are a tremendous resource that I think could be utilized a lot more. We, in fact, have several community colleges within our ecosystem partner network. And kind of the cherry on that sundae is the National Association of Community College Entrepreneurship, better known as NACCE, is headquartered also here in North Carolina, in Raleigh. And that's another group that promotes entrepreneurship, entrepreneurial programming, and other activities on a national level amongst a network of about 350 to 400 community colleges, many of whom are right here in North Carolina. So we see them, I've often said that the two greatest underutilized, underappreciated resources in the economy are our community colleges and our CDFIs. They are the secret 1-2 punch that gets more done with less recognition than anything else that I see kind of on the day-to-day basis in ecosystems and in the economy broadly. And I just hope that people watching can really appreciate, the benefit and how lucky we are for the community college network that we have.
And Thomas, you mentioned COVID-19, right? And it was such a weird year, right, for everyone. And with that said, you know, go a little bit further into some of the guidance you guys have provided businesses to feel that they are in the best position to forge ahead, knowing everything about COVID, having to pivot, and just having a strange year.
Sure, and I smile first because we're going to have to get Tom on our marketing team, yeah, and appreciate the comments. You know, in many cases, I've found since my tenure began in January, as you talk to people across the state of North Carolina, they speak about, you know, how the community college system is the best kept secret in North Carolina, and they say it as a compliment. But I don't take it that way. When I think about it, we shouldn't be the best kept secret because, as Tom says, because of the opportunities that individuals can avail themselves through the community college system, we need to make sure we're amplifying the message. So Tom, I really appreciate your comments. Selena, on your question, I think the first thing businesses can do is avail themselves to the resources as being discussed here today. You know, visit a small business center to get the help they need so they have that support. You know, a small business center counselor can help the business or owner access the current situation, come up with a plan to sustain, even accelerate their businesses. You know, even though we had numerous businesses shuttering their doors during the pandemic, we also had a rise in entrepreneurship in the state. And some of that was due to displaced workers, but, you know, utilize these resources. There's so many available right now that it's, you know, could be overwhelming to navigate them, but they can help the businesses determine a successful path. So getting that counselor engaged with your business would certainly be a good first step as you engage our small business network across the state. Second, I'd remind them to remain resilient. As entrepreneurs, you have to be resilient. Again, as a North Carolina native, I believe that's our competitive advantage in the state, is the resiliency of the people of North Carolina. You know, we have a diverse state, and at the core, we have that attitude that we will continue to press forward. And a big part of resilience is having a strong entrepreneurial mindset, the mental strength and tenacity to keep going in the face of adversity, which we're certainly facing now. We are still working our way through a global pandemic. And it's about having a plan as you go through that. Small business centers can help with a business plan, a marketing plan, and help with the execution of that. Being well positioned in this market now is critically important as you assess the landscape. It starts with understanding your potential customers and carefully crafting a solution to their needs and problems, and then timing your delivery for those services. So I think ensure that their resiliency, that they're planning for the landscape. And, you know, as I said, I'll continue to give guidance to remain strong and to be patient and stay the course. As a former entrepreneur, I know it's very foundational to success of a business. You have to be adaptive, and that's what the various resources that are available help you do, to be innovative in a market that is ever changing. And we're entering a territory that no one has been in before. And that's a post-pandemic of a global pandemic. And the economy that will be associated with recovering with that pandemic will provide opportunities for innovation. So I would say, you know, the key is to be resilient, to plan, to utilize the resources, vast resources across the state of North Carolina as our businesses engage, post-pandemic era.
I'm gonna ask that same very specific question to you. And I know I joined the virtual session for Ice House facilitators, and that, you know, getting that experience virtually. I know I missed out on something in person, right? And just hearing the richness of past experiences with NCID and Ice House facilitator training. And I know that that must have been a challenge. So, talk a little bit more about the guidance directly that you also provided for businesses during the.
Yeah, we weren't immune, right? Like everybody else, and most importantly, like the people we serve, we had to figure it out. We had to, if I can use the cliche, pivot. Our fiscal year is ending this week. So we have a July 1 to June 30. And we're finishing this year at a record number of grants made, dollars deployed, people engaged and served. So COVID notwithstanding, we surpassed our 2019 fiscal year, which was also a record year, and people being served. It was hard. We all had to adapt and start becoming aware when we're muted and what's that in my background, and oh shoot, is that the dog walking into frame? We also had to become tolerant, right? It's amazing, like in March, how we would freak out about something like that, and now when somebody's 3-year-old runs into frame and jumps on the lap, you're like, yeah, we can roll with that. And so we did, but you are absolutely correct. There is still, especially entrepreneurship and economic development, it is a hand-to-hand sport. It benefits from direct engagement. There's just certain things that are lost on that. So we're very much looking forward to the return. But the Ice House Entrepreneurship Program in particular, if there was a silver lining for that and for our labs accelerator program, was that prior to COVID, the facilitator trainings were 3 days in person. As a matter of fact, my co-panelist, who's dressed very well with a tie and coat, he was either in our first or second cohort of training, as I believe his lovely daughter was as well. There's more, esprit de corps. There's more interaction that happens there. But because, but those were place-based. So you had to be able to come to Durham for 3 days, right? If you were going to go through that facilitator training. Now that we're virtual, we really expanded our network, and we are, I think, around 400 certified facilitators now across the state. So in particular, we really got to get engagement in the rural communities that typically struggle to partake and take advantage of these types of programs. So I'll take it, right? I mean, not that I have any choice. It was COVID. So we all just had to kind of make the best of it. But it did allow us to kind of expand that footprint and prepare I'll tell you what, it put on hold. We had this big, bold goal that you heard, Selena, and Thomas, you heard, that we really want to empower 100,000 people in the state of North Carolina with this program, because it's all about entrepreneurial mindset. It's not about writing business plans. It's not about raising money. It's not about a lot of those very important topics that were just talked about in the session prior to this one. Those are all very important. But this is the prereq, right, to use academic term, right? This is, how do I get my head squared away, right? What's the mindset that I need? Where does my locus of control have to be, namely internal, that I feel empowered to go ahead and do this? And so we really considered a life skill that we happen to call an entrepreneurial mindset and put in the guise of an entrepreneurship curriculum. But it's really more of a life skill, which is why in a lot of community colleges in other parts of the country, they're actually offering the Ice House program as a student success program, not as a business program, not as some entrepreneurship club offering, but as a requirement for those who test, into needing dev ed. They will use the Ice House program as a student success program because of the empowerment factor, right? For so many people, their success, however you want to define that in life, is a big part of what their mindset is. How do they greet the day every morning when they get up? Do they feel like they're empowered to do something? Do they have an internal locus of control? Do they have agency? Can they see problems as opportunities? Do they understand the power of choice, right? I choose to spend an hour preparing for a test or homework assignment, or do I choose to take that hour and play a video game or scroll through, my social media? These are the things that we do with this course, and our thesis is, if we can get 100,000 people in the state of North Carolina through this, first of all, everybody will just benefit, regardless of what their chosen, path is in life. a person with an entrepreneurial mindset can still be very well served working in a very large corporation. But some small percent, maybe 1 to 2%, they will be inspired to go start something, company. And that company over time will have significant economic impact to the state of North Carolina because it's going to create jobs, it's going to create wealth, hopefully in communities of color in particular, and in rural communities where we need the jobs and the wealth creation events. So hopefully we're going to have a partnership someday with the community college system to promote and offer this program. We're also, there are already some community colleges in the state that are offering it, but it's not limited to the community college. We have other community partners from churches to recidivism mitigation programs, other economic development organizations. I think we have a chamber of commerce that's offering it. We're only limited by our creativity on how we can apply this because, again, it's a life skill.
Absolutely. I know that I am eager to start facilitating more of the student success, mindfulness, mindset shifts for our students at Knox Street. So I'm looking forward to Ice House this year. Were there any other programs or maybe resources that you all had to change or shift to offer as a result of COVID?
I'll talk about that a little bit. And first, I have to say as well, Tom, you're exactly right. I was a part of one of the early cohorts, and I am a firm believer in the impact that the Ice House program can provide, regardless of whether you are eventually become a entrepreneur or just serving within an organization. I have our divisional meetings today, and I'm talking with a system office team, and I'm impressive upon them that we are all leaders, regardless of our position. And so a part of that also is whether you're going to be an entrepreneur or not. There's some key factors that that type of training provides everyone. And so, Selena, as you say, there's some key shifts. We're looking at, obviously, it goes without saying that as we move forward, especially looking at the business community, it's going to be crucial to continue to provide access to capital for small businesses, but it's also going to be crucial for have a strong ecosystem of support. As I mentioned earlier, successful business owners thrive when they have a trusted advisor, a coaching resource to lean on. As I mentioned, through our small business network, they can do that. But North Carolina is rich in that respect. The community college small business centers, the universities have SBTDCs, the SBA, are able to help businesses, and did so over the past year to 18 months. Thousands of businesses were helped during that process. So those are some of the things, obviously core would be access to capital. We've also seen a toll on our workforce. So we need to know that we'll need to invest in the state's efforts to provide a pipeline for skilled workers. We have several grant and scholarship opportunities within the community college system that, depending on your economic position, that full tuition and fees will be covered. So you have a workforce that has an opportunity to access the community college system and really at a position that they won't have tuition and fees to be concerned with. And that's very important to our small businesses because they need that workforce. They need those individuals that have the education and training to provide the type of support that our businesses need. And we have various scholarships and grants opportunities within the community college system that really either reduce and in many cases eliminate the financial implications of attending and receiving proper education and training. As mentioned just a moment, and Tom touched on rural North Carolina. In many cases, the pandemic has hit harder in the rural parts of our state. We need to ensure that all of our state has access to broadband. The implication of not having access to broadband is significant. We were able to expand broadband to about 15 to 20 of our rural community colleges because of CARES Act funding. We anticipate additional funding for broadband expansion into our rural community colleges, those that need that assistance. So those are the type things that that we see as we adjust and move forward.
We're currently, Noxious Studios is running an 8-week career exploration program for 14 through 16-year-olds, and it's all virtual. And I can't, throughout the past 2 weeks, I couldn't help but see the correlation between workforce readiness skills to entrepreneurship readiness, right? And they go hand in hand. So I already see a partnership between what Tom was talking about and also for community colleges, right? So with that, I'm going to open the floor up to folks in the chat in our community. Are there any questions that you all have for our panelist speakers?
While we wait for questions to come in, let me just compliment another thing that Thomas and you just said. You know, and I know I'm echoing, and I'm not trying to pander here, that community college is such a great resource, but in particular, one of the areas we're really, really strong is in the vocational arts. And I remember visiting Alamance Community College, for example, and Yanni Butler there, who's doing great work. And to say nothing of this new biotech center that just broke ground on, which is going to be incredibly impressive. It's going to rival anything at well, let's just say a couple of colleges that like the shade of blue better watch out, because they're going to have some competition there. But they have this renowned welding program, right? Where I believe they even have to teach a second shift because of the demand for the program. And that's great, right? You know, that you can go there and you can get training on a career field that's going to put you in great demand, right? But you know what's better than being in demand is being in control. And that's where I would, if I had another wish for the community college system of the state of North Carolina, in particular the ones that have these vocational programs, couple them with entrepreneurial mindset training. You know, it's great that you can graduate and be hired immediately because there's such great need in the marketplace. But you will only, your earning potential will only be ever limited based upon how many hours you can work in a day. And if you're ever going to break that cycle of about 2,000 hours a year, you only create wealth when you can leverage the talent and time of other people, namely become the boss, right? And consider starting a welding firm. I think that's, again, it's one of those, it's not sexy, it's not everybody's paying attention to, but can have huge, just absolute large impact in wealth creating in underserved populations, underestimated groups that have the potential, but for just a little bit of support, the training and the education and the exposure to the entrepreneurial mindset.
Yeah. Tom, and you must be following me around. I on that literal example, I was meeting with about 10 of our college presidents in Western North Carolina, and one of them stood up and shared a story of one of their students, and the happened to be a gentleman. He said, you know, to the president, how do you become a millionaire? And the president, well, I don't know how. He said, well, you go to your community college and learn how to be a plumber. Because that student attended a community college, became a plumber, was a plumber for a couple of years. Then he started his own plumbing company. He hired 6 to 8 other plumbers, and now he owns a multi-million-dollar business.
Yeah.
So whether it's plumbing, whether it's electronics, the trades, I wanted to say, if you've ever had to call a plumber recently, they make quite well. But when you couple that with an entrepreneurial mindset, when you couple that with understanding that that independence comes with founding small businesses, it becomes very powerful. And and that's why I'm so excited about the opportunities that exist, because that may not be for everyone, but that's a pathway, one of the pathways that can be provided within our community college system. So yeah, that's happening organically, but I agree, we can be, if we're deliberate with that, it's a game changer for our state.
Yet another way to distinguish us.
Exactly.
All right, so one of our community members, here's the question here. How do we increase the entrepreneurship pipeline among African-American women when they are the most indebted in society because of student loans?
I'll have to say up front, when you talk about the open doors of the community college, we are open to all, but more importantly, as I mentioned, part of my vision is to be affordable and accessible. When you look at the cost of higher education now, that in and of itself is a barrier. That's why I'm so excited about the multiple opportunities, not only for the low cost, already existing low cost to entry to our higher education through the community college system. We now have multiple tools where tuition and fees in particular for individuals would be covered by a scholarship or a grant that doesn't require, it's just that, it's a scholarship or grant. So individuals are not becoming indebted, and they have a pathway to opportunity. And that's my foundational belief, that education equals opportunity. So as we engage our broader community, we believe we have the model that addresses one of the key barriers, and that's accessibility, affordability, so that you don't, in your educational career, with extreme debt, and don't have the barrier to entry because of the scholarships and grants that are available, so that your tuition and fees in many cases are covered by one or multiple of the existing funding streams.
I would only add, there's also a component of representation. There's the public persona of what entrepreneurship is, and it's predominantly white and predominantly male and predominantly private equity backed, and you all seen the movies, right? We need to really expand what the representation and expectation of it is, so that it is absolutely more inclusive. And I'm proud by the portfolio of our grant making, that we have many African American female founders among the grantees. When you make an effort, when as an organization you say, we have this goal, we're going to measure our activity against it, lo and behold, over time, with patience and support, you'll start moving on those goals. And I think as we make it more of a common occurrence that Black founders and women in particular are just as capable. Again, we heard in the earlier session, they're just as good at a return on investment, right? If you want to take the traditional private equity lens, we just have to start investing in the community to help them overcome the confidence, right? There's a lot of skepticism, especially when you look like me and you come out and say, hey, we're going to start this thing called the Black Entrepreneurship Council. It's been more than a few side glances on that. And all I can say is, just watch what we do and judge me on the outcomes. And then we have to go out there and make it real every time. Matter of fact, we just added to our board. So it's not just like, who we serve, it's also who's going to be over us. Sonia Ibram, one of the founders of Courtroom 5, she was a grantee of ours, right? Her and her partner, two, Black female founders, building an incredible company. I mean, I cannot wait for their big exit day someday. And we said, this is what we represent. This is our values. So now we also have to put her in a position of authority. So she's one of my 10 new bosses, namely on my board of directors.
Question from Ms. Nicole Humphrey. Entrepreneurs and small businesses need talent. I like this question already. Any organizations out there that you all may know of that have internship programs that small business owners, can be tapped into to secure support for their staff?
I'll just put a plug in for our apprenticeship program that has really seen significant growth. It's a partnership between the community college system and business and industry, provides a win-win scenario for all. The student obviously is getting an education through the system, but is able to, in partnership with industry, have that on-the-job experience. So they're learning at the same time they have job opportunities. We've served over 15,000 individuals through our apprenticeship NC program and collaborative with business and industry in the state, federal as well. Military installations are participating. So if I guess I would direct to your community college, of course, and inquire about Apprenticeship NC. Again, it's a collaborative. So we're going to make an additional, build upon the success we've had and to expand into the private sector. We just recently brought on board a new Vice President for Economic Development, Dr. Bruce Mack, who's a fellow North Carolinian. You get the theme. And I've given him the charge to expand what has already been a successful program through the apprenticeship program, and expanding that in particular with our private sector and small businesses.
For our part, I don't have the scale platform that Thomas has, but for our part, we do run fellowship and intern programs. We're adding headcount every year. Again, I think we're at our largest crop of about a dozen between all fellows, interns. And the cool thing about that is we take that very, very seriously, and they exist to help with all of our grant companies. So, for us, it's almost a sacred responsibility that they get an experience that no B school in the world can give them, because they'll be directly engaging with startups in a variety of fields at moments in time where those companies are overcoming a variety of challenges. They're looking at, great opportunities. So they're, like I said, they're experiencing something that they won't get a chance to experience anywhere else. And they take that experience with them forever. We're also funding entrepreneurship programs, in particular at Central. So at NCCU, we're funding a multi-year program there. We have discussions in the works at A&T. I think more focus and interaction and partnerships with the HBCUs here will be welcome. We have several partners that we're kicking around ideas as we speak on how we might not be able to get more students exposed to the startup, pipeline, so to speak. That goes back to the representation issue, right? I think for too many coming out of higher ed, and this is not a slight to higher ed. I mean, obviously, higher education is a great way to increase your earnings potential. But I think for so many that if you're kind of in this track, the idea of even joining a startup or doing a startup, you're not even exposed to it, right? The number one predictor of somebody doing something entrepreneurial is whether or not you were exposed to it as a child in your family, right? That's not a common experience. My kids grew up in a house with a crazy father who was starting something new every 3 to 5 years. So they all three are entrepreneurial, but that's not a common experience. So how can we get more students that are in the systems, plugged into, opportunities, internship opportunities, so that they can get exposed to it? And I should say, once exposed, if they can, through critical self-assessment, go, okay, that's not for me, then that's fine. That's an okay outcome, right? At least you were exposed to it, and you use cognitive thinking to say, I don't want to go down that path. What I worry about is the potential that's lost on people that would do so well, but for ever being exposed to it.
I 100% concur, Tom. It's the exposure. You have the option of choice, and I relish in the idea of giving, especially our students, middle school and high school students, the choice to choose what path they want to go to, right? And it's not one that is self-designed for them from somebody else, but it's one that they have enacted, that they have decided that is going to work well for them, paired with other skills that they can gain in terms of the academic piece, and merge those together nicely. Also, plug to that question, Knox Street Studios is launching the AAA Assess, Adopt, Adapt incubator program for small businesses in August. So stay tuned, and I'll be happy to share some of those resources. We have one more question from our community. What types of balances of funding, grants, loans, equity, venture capital, do you think is necessary across North Carolina? And how do you envision an ideal capital stack for the pipeline?
So if you don't mind, I'll jump on that one. It's kind of in our bailiwick. For the most part, all capital is welcome. not all capital is created equal. So anything that's going to be non-dilutive grant money is better, right? Because it is by definition non-dilutive. It's free money. And that's what our programs are. And if you look over the years, the 15-ish million we've deployed, and you see what the companies that have been funded have done with that money, namely how many of them gone off and been wildly successful. As a matter of fact, last week, you all probably saw the announcement, Spoonflower got acquired for $225 million from Shutterfly. Spoonflower was in one of our earliest cohorts. They were a $50,000 seed grantee winner in 2008, when by Garth's own admission, every nickel was like $20. So people ask us, like, hey, imagine if you had a little taste of that, because a lot of economic development organizations like ours, they have these grant programs, but they take equity or they put it in as debt with a conversion. And my reaction is, kind of on a creating more resources, I have more to deploy. Yes, that would be cool. And certainly any of these wonderfully exited alumni of ours are more than welcome to stroke us a check and receive all the tax benefits from supporting a little nonprofit. But that changes the lens with which you look at things. Because now if I'm relying on ROI, return on that investment, then I'm in the game of picking winners, so to speak. And I think one of the unique parts of our formula, which makes us very unusual, is because it's non-dilutive funding, it is free money, we have the freedom, for lack of a better word, to make long bets that nobody else in the capital stack is incentivized to take that risk. And when you couple with that the ambition and the value we have to be more of a resource to underserved groups, that becomes very, very important. One of the things that has increased our ability to serve, females, minorities, and rural communities was this micro grant program we did starting back 3 years ago. Because what we found out was where there's disparity in access is later in the stages, which is why before, I took over 5 years ago, the majority of grant winners were, as we say tongue in cheek, two white dudes from Duke with an app to fill in the blank, right? And that's because they could last longer in the life cycle. So we had to have an intervention earlier in the life cycle with more risk tolerant money, with more, capacity to say, yep, we're right there with you. We have no idea if this is going to work, but if it does, it's going to impact your community in a very big way. So let's go ahead and put some money in there. We have a decent amount of private equity. Plenty of people would say we could use a lot more. We're going to get that chance through the SSBCI funding that just recently came out in the ARP, the American Rescue Plan. I think that's going to be managed by the Rural Center. It's going to be hundreds of millions of dollars. So I think private equity is going to get a big shot in the arm here. And then there's just other institutional ways of either stroking checks directly or other monetary value options beyond just an injection of cash, like being a first client, right? In other states, Atlanta's got a great program where the big Fortune 500 companies there have come together to volunteer to the startup community to say, we will consider being a client of yours, recognizing that you're going to try to bring products into the market and it's going to be bumpy and we're going to be your guinea pig. That's okay. That is huge for a startup. That first client, that first validation, that opportunity to figure something out. So I think we have a lot to work with, but I think there's still a lot more we can do.
While I'm not directly involved in that anymore, I'm a frustrated private equity principal. Always wanted to, can't seem to find the pathway. So I've been called to in a different area. I did in another role. I had the opportunity to lead an effort that looked at the ecosystem in North Carolina, in particular around early stage funding. So again, never had a chance to get into it other than from the development point of view. We were able to get state funding to start a venture fund around a $60 million fund on early stage and innovation focused fund. But literally this week, in my role is in the community college, talking with a fund that is in the process of developing, and that is recognizing the value in North Carolina, the entrepreneurial spirit here, the business climate here. So to answer your question, I would say all of the above. We are seeing that now in North Carolina, and it's growing. And so from our perspective, certainly we're preparing and provide that support, whether it's through our small business centers, whether it's through just general education and training. I see our role in the community college system working hand in hand with those individuals that have those funds to invest, because we're on as a part of that equation, ensuring that those budding entrepreneurs or their workforce is properly prepared to execute those business plans, and therefore helping be a part of securing those funds or be invested in substantial businesses in our state.
We have about 5 minutes left. I'm going to wrap up. Any closing thoughts from our panelists that you'd like to leave with our community?
Just in closing, I would just like to say, well, first and foremost, I appreciate the opportunity to join the Black Business Forum today and have this dialogue. It's extremely important. We are at a challenging time in North Carolina's history, but I'm enthusiastic about the future. I'm extremely enthusiastic about the role that the North Carolina Community College system will play in North Carolina's economic recovery, but more importantly, our growth moving forward. As we've discussed today, not only helping prepare the workforce, but also serving, I would surmise, the leading role in our economy in the state. So I would certainly tell the viewers today, as we said a little earlier, resiliency, that's a part of the North Carolina spirit. The collaboration that you hear today is extremely important. We have numerous resources throughout our state to support small businesses and minority-owned businesses. And I just encourage the listeners today to take advantage of those resources available. That is a competitive advantage in North Carolina. You need to make it a competitive advantage for your business. So again, appreciate seeing some old friends today with Tom and meeting new friends, and look forward to the North Carolina's future. I think is extremely positive as we come through these very challenging times.
I'll conclude as I started by amplifying something the wise Thomas Stith just said: competitive advantage. Despite COVID in 2020, North Carolina had an increase of high propensity new firm filings, namely over 7,000 over the average. The average startup in North Carolina creates just shy of 5 jobs in the first years of its existence. So think about that. We had a record number, only one of 9 states in the country that had over 40,000 of these new high propensity firm filings. And we had 7,000 more than what our annual average is. And if the average one of those startups is going to employ about 5 people, that's 35,000 jobs. We just had this great, win, whatever you want to call it, landing. We got Apple to come to the triangle. And that took almost $1 billion worth of incentives to do that, for the promise of 3,000 jobs. So we have organically the opportunity for 35,000 additional jobs on top of what their normal baseline of job creation is to the state. That's largely just taken for granted, right? Because nobody's advocating for them. There's no politician trying to take, credit during an election cycle that, yes, Ajax International just created 3 jobs, right? And they're in 2 years, they're gonna have 12 jobs. But it's real from an impact standpoint. So ask yourself, what would communities be willing to pony up from just support, resources, tax incentives for 35,000 jobs if we're going to spend $1 billion for just 3,000 jobs? That is why we are, saying, and I'm putting this out in our public narrative, that what we're trying to do is redefine what economic development is fundamentally through entrepreneurship. Because I think it's a longer term. I'm not against, attraction and trying to recruit firms here. I think it's not an either or strategy, it's an and strategy. And I think if we ever got to a point where we could say, well, if we're willing to put X dollars aside in incentives to attract, then let's have some percent as a set aside that has to support the early stage startup ecosystem. And if we found equilibrium there, we would find that it would complement each other. Because after all, and again, not to denigrate that, you know, we get 3,000 Apple engineers here. Some of them are going to leave Apple to start really good, cool companies inspired by some deep tech that they're working on, right? And that too has to be considered in the calculus. And that's actually an argument for bringing Google, which is going to put 1,000 engineers like 3 blocks from where I'm sitting right now in the Apples of the world. But there's got to be an and strategy that says, let's also focus on supporting, you know, the potential of all these other people that are saying, I will self-direct my life. I'm going to go forth and do something for myself and my community.
And I would like to thank both of you all for joining us as speakers. I definitely caught the entrepreneurship bug and moved into North Carolina, and I felt comfortable doing so. And Tom was one of the first amazing folks I met. So this has been a great call, and I've enjoyed moderating this session. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our speakers.
And I'd like to thank all of you. So Selena, thank you for facilitating the session. Thank you, Thomas. The Hub office regularly sends our small business owners to the small business centers for guidance, whether it's lean business model or figuring out their systems and processes to make sure that they're operating well. Tom, we're looking forward to continuing the conversation with NC IDEA. It's very important that people operate with the entrepreneurial mindset, no matter what line of work they're in, what kind of role they're in. So thanks to you all for sharing your wealth of information with us today. Thank you so very much. And we look forward to having you with us on the next sessions as well, but continuing our partnership as a whole.
Thank you.
Be sure to click for the next session.
Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.